The sound is metal on wood. Small impacts. Precise. Rhythmic. A compositor stands at a tall wooden frame called a California job case, fingers moving without looking. He's building a line of text backward, mirror image, letter by letter, space by space, into a narrow metal stick held in his left hand. The letters are lead alloy, cold, each one smaller than a fingernail. He sets them upside down and reversed. His hands know where the lowercase e lives, where the comma sits, where the capital M hides in the uppercase. 224 locations memorized. No hesitation. 30 words per minute. Some faster. The room smells like ink and oil and metal dust. There's no screen. No backspace. One mistake means pulling the whole line apart and starting over. This is how books were made, how newspapers were assembled, how every menu, every poster, every wedding invitation entered the world for 500 years. Not typed. Set. By hand. Hand composition wasn't printing. It was the step before printing. A compositor's job was to translate a manuscript into physical type, arranging individual pieces of cast metal into lines, locking those lines into pages, preparing them for the press. The actual printing happened later, often by someone else. But without the compositor, there was no print. The work required three things most people don't think about: memory, touch, reverse literacy. Every letter had to be placed backward. You read left to right, but you set right to left so the impression reads correctly. Your brain had to constantly invert. After years, compositors stopped thinking about it. Their hands just knew. The California job case, the wooden tray that held the letters, was organized by frequency, not alphabet. The lowercase e, the most common letter in English, sat in the largest compartment within easy reach. The Z was tucked in a corner. Capital letters lived in the upper section. Punctuation scattered throughout. A new apprentice might take 6 months to memorize the layout. A master could set type in the dark. If you grew up around a print shop, you'll recognize that sound. The soft tick, tick, tick of metal letters dropping into the composing stick. The work was standing work. 8 hours. 10 hours, sometimes more. You stood at the case. You held the composing stick in your left hand, a small adjustable metal frame, maybe 4 inches long. With your right hand, you plucked letters from the case and slid them into the stick, one after another, building the line from right to left. Spaces mattered as much as letters. Between words, you inserted thin strips of lead or brass. Too much space and the line looked awkward. Too little and words ran together. You adjusted by feel, sliding in a hair-thin piece of copper, pulling out a slightly thicker lead strip, balancing the line until it sat just right. When the line was full, you transferred it to a galley, a long metal tray. Then you started the next line. Page by page. Paragraph by paragraph. There was a physical weight to every sentence. A compositor named Arthur, who worked in a Chicago print shop from 1947 to 1978, once said the thing people don't understand is how much you felt the text. You didn't just read it. You touched every word, held every letter. Your hands carried the weight of language in a way typing never would. He was 16 when he started. His uncle ran the shop. First week, they gave him a practice case and a stick and told him to set the Gettysburg address. Took him 4 hours. His back ached. His fingers were sore. The lines came out uneven. His uncle looked at it and said, "Now do it again." By the end of the year, Arthur could set 35 words per minute without looking at the case. The precision wasn't just in placement. It was in spacing. Every line had to be exactly the same length, justified, edge to edge. If a line ran short, you added spacing. If it ran long, you tightened it, sometimes replacing the word with a shorter synonym, sometimes shrinking the spaces microscopically until it fit. You did this by hand. You did this for every line. A single page of a novel might have 30 lines. A newspaper page might have 200. Each one had to lock perfectly into the frame, tight enough that nothing shifted during printing, loose enough that you could disassemble it later and return the letters to the case for reuse. Compositors called it justifying the line. It required mathematical intuition and tactile sensitivity. You learned to feel when a line was a ½ millimeter too tight. Have you seen a workshop like this close in your lifetime? Linotype changed everything. Invented in 1886 by Ottmar Mergenthaler, the linotype machine automated composition. An operator sat at a keyboard, like a typewriter, and typed the text. The machine cast entire lines of type in molten lead, all at once, perfectly justified. No hand setting, no individual letters, no composing stick. A skilled linotype operator could produce 6,000 characters per hour. A hand compositor might manage 2,000 on a good day. By the 1890s, newspapers were switching over. By the 1920s, most commercial print shops had at least one linotype. By the 1950s, hand composition survived mainly in small-town shops, specialty presses, and places where the owner was too old or too stubborn to invest in the machine. Arthur's uncle bought a linotype in 1963. Arthur learned to operate it. The shop needed him to. But he said it felt different. Faster, yes. More efficient. But you didn't touch the words anymore. You pressed keys and the machine did the rest. There was a distance. He kept the old cases in the back of the shop, used them for custom jobs, wedding invitations, small-run poetry books, anything that needed a certain look. The kind of work where clients paid extra because it was hand-set. By the 1970s, those jobs were rare. Where are you watching from? Are trades like this still alive in your town? And the second wave of obsolescence came with phototype setting and then digital. In the 1970s and 80s, computers replaced linotype machines. Type became light, not metal. Designers worked on screens. Layouts happened in software. The entire physical infrastructure of printing, the cases, the letters, the galleys, the imposing stones, became unnecessary. Print shops closed or modernized. The old equipment was scrapped, sold, or donated to museums. Compositors retired, and there was no one to replace them. Arthur retired in 1992. The shop closed a year later. His uncle had died. There were no nephews interested in learning. The building was sold to a dry cleaner, and he kept a few things. A composing stick, a drawer of 12-point Caslon, a wooden mallet used for locking up forms. He said the hardest part wasn't losing the work. It was knowing the skill would die with his generation. If you've ever watched hands move like this, you know it's different from watching a screen. There are still hand compositors. Not many. Mostly letterpress enthusiasts, artists, people who run small presses as a deliberate choice, printing limited edition books, posters, chapbooks. They've revived the craft as an art form, not a trade. But the trade itself, the daily, industrial, commercial work of setting type by hand, is gone. So the knowledge remains in a few places. There's a printing museum in Virginia that offers workshops. A retired compositor in Vermont still teaches classes. A few art schools include letterpress in their programs. But these are preservation efforts, not apprenticeships. The people learning today are hobbyists, students, designers curious about history. They're not 16-year-olds starting a 40-year career in a print shop, because there are no print shops. Do you think skills like this should still be taught? What gets lost isn't just the technique, it's the sensory knowledge. The way a compositor could feel a line was too tight before measuring it. The way they knew a font by weight and texture before reading it. The way they could estimate a job's length by holding the manuscript, feeling its heft, calculating galleys in their mind. That kind of knowledge lives in repetition. You can't learn it from a book. You can't watch a video and understand it. You have to do it, every day, for years, until your body remembers what your mind doesn't need to think about anymore. Arthur said there were moments, maybe once a month, maybe less, when everything aligned. The text flowed. The spacing came naturally. Your hands moved without thought. The line justified perfectly on the first try, again and again. And you'd look up and realize an hour had passed, and you'd set 6 pages, and they were beautiful. He called it the rhythm. Not every day, but sometimes. And that was enough. Maybe someone in your family worked a trade like this. The tools are still around. You can buy vintage type cases on eBay. Composing sticks show up at estate sales. Metal type gets sold by the pound. Some of it ends up with hobbyists. Some melted down for scrap. The machines, the linotypes, the old proof presses, are harder to move, heavy, require maintenance. Museums take some. The rest rust in barns or get hauled away. Arthur donated his uncle's California job case to a local historical society. They have it on display in a room about early 20th century industry. There's a placard explaining what it was used for. He visited once, said it looked smaller than he remembered. The last generation of commercial hand compositors is dying. The skills they carried, built over decades, refined through millions of letters set, held in muscle and memory, are fading. Not because the work was replaced by something better or worse, just because it became unnecessary. Machines did it faster. Computers did it easier. And the trade, as like so many others, became a footnote. There's no tragedy here, no moral lesson, just documentation. This is what the work was. This is how it felt. This is who did it. And now, mostly, it's over. Skill lives in hands, and hands do not last forever. Under this video, there's a subscribe button. It's a small action, but it helps keep stories like this alive. If craftsmanship still matters to you, if you believe skill deserves to be remembered, subscribing simply means you want these trades documented while they're still here. And before you go, tell us where you're watching from. Is there still a blacksmith in your town? A shoe repair shop? A workshop that smells like oil and wood? Have you lived this life or watched it fade? Share your story in the comments. That's how these trades stay visible.